Welcome to the FarmBits podcast.
FarmBits is proudly produced by the Nebraska Digital Agriculture Team and hosted by students at the University of Nebraska.
The FarmBits podcast comes to you each week to discuss the trends, the realities, and the value of digital agriculture.
Through interviews with experts, producers, and innovators from across the agriculture industry, we hope that you step away from each episode with new practical knowledge of digital agriculture technology. Hello, FarmBits followers, and welcome to another episode of the FarmBits podcast. I'm Kelsey Swantek.
And I'm Deepak Ghimire, and we are glad to have you with us as we continue our discussion on imagery service and use in ag systems.
On this episode, we're joined by Dr. Yeyin Shi, Assistant Professor and Ag Information Systems Engineer at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
Dr. Shi and her team create and apply information technology to record, transmit, manage, and use digital information related to the health, productivity, and sustainability of the agricultural production systems.
Tune into this episode to learn more about Dr. Shi's work.
I'm Yeyin Shi, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Biological Systems Engineering at UNL, and with the teaching and research appointment. So I am originally from China, and I came to US for graduate study for both of my master and PhD degrees, and both also in agriculture engineering from Oklahoma State University. And I was focused on instrumentation, sensing, and computer vision technologies. And my current research and teaching at UNL also falls into that big area of precision or the digital agriculture technologies, and especially the agricultural remote sensing and also agricultural information and data analytics.
So you mentioned that you have both a teaching and a research appointment here at the university. What does that actually mean, and what does that look like on a kind of day-to-day or month-to-month basis?
At most of the land-grant university, we have the missions of educating the broad citizens in the state, and also we also hold the mission for research. So typically a faculty member would have 2 or even more of the 3 appointments, which is teaching, research, and extension, or outreach. So as like myself, I have those 2 appointments, teaching and research. That means I need to dedicate part of my efforts for teaching and then part of my efforts for research. And I have 50 teaching and 50 research appointments. So it's pretty much like I will evenly split my efforts there. So I would teach the classes during the semesters, and then especially during the summer semester here, which is from May to say mid-August, I will more focus on the research.
Awesome. As you mentioned in one of the previous questions that you came all a long way from China, and you are now at the assistant professor position at UNL. So I think it would be interesting to reflect back on your journey to academia. Can you please explain what sparked your interest in academia, and particularly remote sensing and agricultural research? And what was the journey like? How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, I was actually born and grown up in a big city in China, located in the bottom of the Yangtze River, which is the biggest river in China. But even though I am a city girl, we are not too far away from the suburban and then the rural area, because it is a traditional agriculture area, and it's still nowadays it's still a very productive agriculture region in China. So ever since my childhood, like say during the holidays, the vacations, my parents would take me to the rural areas, and I see those beautiful canola like flower, like yellow, very bright yellow flowering, and just all the way along the roads. And then also our elementary school, middle school, high school curriculum. We also have a lot of curriculum and those experiences created for us to actually to get involved in person in those agricultural production. So I am actually not that far away from agriculture production, and so those all planted those little seeds in my mind. And I when I went to the college in China, I just happened to enter in like agriculture and forestry focused university and did my bachelor's in engineering. So it's very natural for me when I was looking for graduate study in US, I was looking for those agricultural engineering programs. And very luckily, I got a chance with assistantship to do my graduate study here, and I was very impressed about all those modern and advanced agricultural technologies here, and also those vast, like say, very large lands. So if you are thinking about those agricultural fields in Asia, and it's all like typically would be very small ones, and then a lot of manual labels, manual work still involved there. So I was very impressed by the agriculture technology, and I decided, oh, this is the career that I want to follow. And you were talking about remote sensing. Remote sensing, I actually really get into it during late of my graduate study and also my postdoctoral experience. And I was just very fascinated about those aerial or like space imagery taken by airplanes, by the satellites, and also at that moment the drones is just like say starting there. So really fascinated about like the bird's view of the Earth's surface, especially for those beautiful agricultural lands. So I guess that's how I get into this area.
So when you came over to the US, this is going to be a broad question because everywhere does everything differently. But when you came to the US, what are some of the biggest differences between production practices that take place in China versus here in Nebraska?
A major difference would be the scale of the land, the scale of the field. For most of the like say the countries in Asia, it's like say small fields, small land, and then typically it will be scattered in between those residential areas. So and that really determines the agricultural machinery and the technologies that can be used there. So, for example, we just mentioned about remote sensing and then the drones. Like the drone technologies actually has a lot of application in the Asian countries, not only for sensing, for scouting the field, but also for the aerial applications. For example, apply for the chemicals or like say herbicides, pesticides, etc. However, here, due to the vast scale of the lands, it's almost impossible for something like a drone to really find the same type of rows there. But instead, there's just huge agricultural machineries, and also, like say, if we're talking about, like say, chemical application, besides the ground-based, and we also have, like say, the airplane-based aero application. And then also because of that, because of the scale of the land, there's just no way for the manual work to be a major effort there, right? So there's no way for human to cover that vast area of the land. So, and that also results with all those advanced machineries and technologies being created here.
Yeah, that's great to know. Like at least in some parts of Asia there are use of drones, but in some parts of the Asia the land is very fragmented and there are smallholder farmers because of weeds. The applicability of like the agricultural machineries is still hindered.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so now let us dive a little more into your research areas. Looking at your areas of research, we can see one among the list is remote sensing systems. So can you please explain us a little about your current projects in that arena?
Sure. So my current research has been focused on how can we actually do something other than the traditional agricultural remote sensing or the traditional types of information that we could get from the agricultural remote sensing. For example, we're all familiar with those classical vegetation indices, for example, like NDVI or NDRE. They are very important, and they are classical ones that are being researched, being developed, and also being demonstrated for decades for their application and their importance in agricultural management, in agricultural production. However, my research has been focused on, okay, so besides those, what are the newer information that we could get from the remote sensing data or from other types of data that are readily available in agricultural productions? And then how can we make use of them to better help with our decision making? So, for example, if we use, like say, drone-based remote sensing as an example, one of the very popular area in research right now is how can we use machine or deep learning techniques to extract more information from the data that can complement with the traditional classical vegetation indices, and then how can we really use them to guide our day-to-day practices. So that's pretty much what I have been focused on for my research so far.
So that's very cool. But to dive into that a little bit deeper even yet, there's a lot of issues in ag just in general, but what are some of the bigger problems that can be solved with the use of UAVs or remote sensing?
I think the UAVs is more going to be a sampling tool rather than something that we can rely on for covering, like say, regular, like say, daily information, daily data collection for a really large area. So for example, like the drones could only, with the current best technology, it probably could fly like half an hour, or some types of the drones and some manufacturer could bump up to maybe like an hour flight time, but that's the limit there. And also the data processing and then the data analysis followed by the data collection would also needs not only time and then investment on the hardware, but also needs expertise there. So I would say at this point, the drones application in agriculture are still like small scale, and it would be a supplement of the, say, satellite imagery or like airborne imagery. And however, it would be a very good sampling tool. For example, if you identified or if you suspect that there is a problematic area in your field, instead of like say you actually being there, you could send the drones there to take a closer look before you actually be there, or your, say, someone in your group being there physically.
Yeah, that's really interesting, like how even both of them are used for receiving or collecting data from the agricultural fields. What peculiar characteristics we are interested in may differ if we are actually using a UAV or satellite-based sensing data. So on that note, like let's dive a little more into your particular areas of research. Currently, there has been a lot of use of drones in agriculture, particularly in breeding program. So when I went through your publication list, that I saw some of the key areas of your research includes use of UAVs for high throughput phenotyping. So can you please explain a little to our audience what high throughput phenotyping is?
Sure. So high throughput phenotyping is actually probably originated about a decade ago, and then it started from Europe and then Australia, and shortly I think it's also started in North America here. So the very original purpose of the high throughput phenotyping is actually closely related with the breeding, because so for the genetic the sequencing, people already like overcome the bottleneck there. So they were able to do the sequencing in a very short amount of time for a very large panel there. However, we all understand that we could not release a variety or a line there without actually seeing their performance in the field under a particular environment. So we always need to actually to plant them in the field, but then there are just so many potential varieties or potential lines there, and then how can we screen their performance with less human labor there, and then in a shorter time is really a problem. So we really want the automated way, using all those technologies and then the machineries that are designed for a quicker screening there. And also we need something there to have a more objective way of rating or log the information rather than more subjective way. For example, if we have 10 people there and then 10 people may not give the same rating for the plants, right? For the varieties. And that's how the high throughput plant phenotyping, how it originated about a decade ago.
So how has that changed how conventional phenotyping works?
So conventionally, I believe it's the agricultural professionals just walk through the field, start from very early in the day or a particular time, and then has to cover every single foot of the field to do the ratings or do the logs. But then with the technologies, with those the machinery and the sensing technologies, that's how we can cover higher throughput. We can cover larger lands with a higher throughput there. And also we can use collect the same types of information for every variety, for every field. So it's more objective there.
Yeah, interesting to see how things had changed over time and how the advancement in technology had changed our lives. So on that same note, what does this change from a conventional phenotyping to a drone-based, UAV-based, high-throughput phenotyping actually mean to a farmer?
So I would say farmers are probably would be benefit from better varieties, better seeds. So this high throughput plant phenotyping would eventually bring something good for farmers. Yeah, so it is probably not directly related, but it's actually very important. So all those big seed companies, they actually have their own R&D groups are working on the high throughput phenotyping technologies, and they also use it for their actual the breeding process.
Very cool. So taking a step back, just back to general UAVs for any ag use, there's a lot of companies that are making this switch to higher resolution satellite imagery in the ag field versus using drones or UAVs to make their management decisions. What do you think the future of drone use in ag looks like, just because of that higher switch and that higher push towards satellite imagery?
So I always believe that all these technologies are going to be working together. None of them is going to, replace another one. So satellite imagery or satellite remote sensing just keep advancing there. And then we see from several years ago, we could only have the imagery with about, say, 100 feet spatial resolution to nowadays we could have, a few feet spatial resolution is a very, very typical ones, or even higher ones for some of the areas or for some of the commercial satellites there. So it definitely it brings a lot of opportunities and a lot of applications in agriculture. And then we touched this earlier. Drones is a readily available tool, provided that there is someone who is skilled to do this. That you can use it as a sampling tools for your field. One of the issues with the drone nowadays is because the federal policies or the regulations, the drone flight, we still need someone who have a certain certificate to fly the drones. The technology for completely autonomous drones, which there's going to be a station right by the field, and then the drones will take off at a certain time, and then will fly over the field and will come back automatically and then dock on a charging station there, and also transfer the data out. And then it could be easily transferred to, say, the local machines or up to the cloud for processing. Could also, you could also schedule for a particular application based on the decision or based on the results you see from the previous flights. So that kind of technologies is actually already existing there. However, there's no ways for it to be implemented now because of that drone regulation there. And even that regulation will be lifted, there's still some limitations there in terms of, say, the battery capacity and then the flight time, and then also all those kind of safety issues, right? So is the system reliable enough? Or sometimes people are also concerning about the cyber security, right? So is the data going to be sent somewhere that is undesired? So all those things there. So I would say in a near future, the drones would probably stay most of these applications still in the research area, and probably for those more large ag sectors, which they could have their own R&D group or their own, like say, specially trained employees to operate this kind of tools with lower like entering bars there.
In the last, I would probably say 5 to 7 years, there was a huge push to use drones in ag. You know, that was the biggest new thing in agriculture is everyone needs a drone. You can do all these cool things. But very recently, I would say in the past 2 years or so, that narrative has started to change. And now the push is more towards satellite imagery. In your opinion, what's been the driving factor behind that change?
Good question. I think for every new technologies, there would always be a cycle there. For example, initially it would always be like a hype, and then everyone is just very excited, very interested, very hopeful about it, and then a lot of trials, a lot of application is going to be there, and then after a while, when we pass the peak of that hype, then that hype, and then everyone's going to be like cool down, and then we'll have a more like say objective view for this technology. So its application is probably going to reduce until like one of the valley there in that cycle, and then if a technology can survive there, then it will go, and its application is actually will go up, and then it will be more sustained, more mature, and some of the technologies will just, it will just never pass that. So the valley point there, which I think for drones, it's past that peak of that hype point, and it's coming down on the like say going down a little bit. But I think the drone technologies would actually pass that, like say that lowest point, and it actually will bounce back there, and it will have a better it will position itself better in the overall technologies, and then the technologies will also be adapted according to the applications, the needs there, and then it will sustain. It will be more mature there.
That's a very interesting perspective. So you think drones are going to have a second, I guess, push on them coming up sometime eventually, is what you're saying?
Yes, I believe that.
That's very cool. I think you touched on this a little bit, but in case you happen to have more to add to it, what are some of the pros and cons of using a drone compared to that satellite imagery?
So satellite imagery is, of course, for production ag, it's of course it's important, and then I would say no one will replace its roles there because it can cover large area, and then with its higher and higher spatial resolution, for example, that 3 feet spatial resolution is very common nowadays. So with that 3 feet, that's for a lot of the cases, it's good enough. And on the drone side, if you see something abnormal from that 3 feet, spatial resolution imagery, and you probably want to know more what exactly happened there. So in that case, if you could have a drone to fly over that area, at least you can see canopy level, or actually it's going to be leaf level, right? I'd say that the leaf level, the detailed information there, and that will, of course, that will help you to understand more how things exactly going on there. Satellite, if you think about it, say the overall cost, then it's of course it's way more costly than a drone system. However, the satellite is running by either the federal government, or it's running by the commercial, like very big commercial companies there. So they've already somehow distributed all those costs to, already prior cost, or to some kind of, if you subscribe there, and then the subscription is actually not going to be very expensive. And also there are more rigorous data processing there to make sure the data quality. And then for the drones, because still at its, like, say, earlier stage, if we look at its, like, say, its overall lifetime, there is just relatively less, very mature, very rigorous data processing there, or like, say, free data processing there. So we still need to pay for that, or pay for the person, or to train the person with that expertise to do it. So I guess that's another major thing. But if, for example, if we do the research, then if we do have those, the students with those expertise, then it's going to provide us, like, say, much higher, much more detailed information. And then we could do that anywhere and anytime as we need it. And then I do like to add one more thing that I forgot to mention is, so far, most of us, our thinking for drones is still thinking it as a sensing tools, but it's actually, besides sensing, it could also be used as an actuation, or as an application tools. For example, we could use drones for like spraying the chemicals. So in that case, drone is, can have some more like versatile application there.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Like, although there are some common advantages or common uses of both drones and satellite image, there are some peculiar uses and benefits that we can take out of the drones that cannot be done with satellite-based remote sensing. That's interesting. So let's talk on a little broader area here. So at the start of the conversation, you mentioned that the mission of the land-grant university is research, extension, and education. So what do you believe is the role of the public sector, particularly academia, in developing precision ag technologies and preparing farmers for a transition to using these technologies in their operations?
Yeah, I think a major difference for us doing in the universities versus, like, say, all those great things happening in the companies or in the industry, is that we are probably not just focused on one particular technologies, and then we're not probably going to focus just on one particular applications. We're more abroad there. We whichever technologies or whichever applications are important there, that will attract our interest. And also we are more, we are not biased. For example, we would not just say, satellite is better or drone is better. We're doing more objective evaluation there. I think that's probably one of the major difference there.
We this summer interviewed a lot of Nebraska Extension educators, and that was one thing that we kept coming back to is in the Nebraska On-Farm Research Network, we use whatever products we want to try out or the farmer wants to try out for their operation. But at the end of the day, we're never going to say company A is horrible, company B is the best, and company C is okay. We're going to say, here's what we found out, here's our data, do with it what you want to do. And I think that's something that's very cool about that public sector.
Yeah, sure, exactly. And also I would say here in the university, we may work on something that is, say, 10 years or 50 years later down the road, which may seem like a crazy idea there, or something like a dream, but that's and then not something that can be directly or quickly turned into the profit there. But that's something, I think for the research that we need to do that for the future.
Absolutely. That's very cool perspective on that. What's something that you look forward to in the future of digital ag and precision ag technologies?
Yeah, I think for the digital ag and precision ag technologies, I think we've always making constant progress there. In a few decades ago, we were really focused on say the machinery, and then later on the instrumentation, and then the sensing technologies. And nowadays people are very interested and focused on the data or the information aspect, but none of them is going to be, it's going to be diminishing there. I think what all of them are very, very important, and they are actually going to rely on each other. So precision and then digital ag technologies, I would say we should not develop the technologies or the techniques just for the sake of having cool technologies or cool techniques there. We always need to keep in mind with the needs, with the problem there. That's something I think we should just keep in mind. For example, it's not something like, oh, we do super detailed scale is the better, right? It's not always like the finer the scale, it's the better. We always need to consider, what is really the best scale or the optimal scale? How precise we really need there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. In the future, the digital and precision agriculture technologies will more focus towards the need-based solutions and actually help the farmers or other sectors out in need. So as we approach towards the end of the episode today, where can our listeners go to learn more about anything that we have discussed today and about your research?
Oh, I have my university website page. If you just search my name, I guess you could find it. But I would also say there are just lots of, way better information from, say, the university website, from, like you mentioned, about the on-farm research. So lots of tons of great information there. And then for students, one of the good ways, if you really are interested in dig more into it, in addition to some of the resources you probably already know, would be like say all those literature search channels there, right? So for example, like say the Google Scholar or any kind of like say those journal article or conference article, all those libraries or the digital databases, if you really interested in like say more on the research side.
We have a tradition on the FarmBits podcast. We like to ask our guest for some words of wisdom or a piece of advice for any listeners who may be interested in implementing remote sensing systems, whether they are a producer, researcher, or anything else. So what would be your piece of advice?
I would say do the things right and also do the right things. So not just use some kind of technologies because others are using it, but also tailored with your own needs. But also be open, like give it a try out, and then if you see it's not having the results as you expected, try to dig a little bit more into it. Try to learn how it operates, and then what's the principle. Just try to learn a little bit more there, and then give it a little bit more chance to let it work for you, or before you just give it up. And also keep learning, keep exploring, and also be open for something new there.
Thank you very much to Dr. Yeyin Shi for taking the time to join this episode of the FarmBits podcast.
It's really exciting to learn about all the different uses and applications of UAVs in agriculture. Dr. Shi and her team are working on some really cool projects.
One of my favorite parts of this episode was hearing about the sort of competition between UAV and satellite imagery, but also how they can work together to improve ag systems.
I absolutely agree. I found it really cool to hear her perspective on the use of UAVs increasing again as their technology continues to develop.
I hope you enjoyed that episode, and we look forward to sharing another digital ag story with you next week. Thank you for taking the time to join us today on the FarmBits podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts to be informed about the latest content each week.
We welcome your feedback, so if you have comments or questions for us, please reach out to us over email, on Twitter, or in the reviews section of your favorite podcast platform. Our contact information can be found in the show notes.
We would like to thank Nebraska Extension for their support of this podcast and their commitment to providing high-quality informational material to members of the agricultural community in Nebraska and beyond.
The opinions expressed by the hosts and guests on this podcast are solely their own and do not reflect the views of Nebraska Extension or the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
We look forward to you joining us next week for another episode of FarmBits.